We want to get started here so we can give Jake as much time as we possibly can. Just a quick reminder, put your phones either on silent or turn them off or tear the batteries out or throw them against a wall. I don't know what you need to do, but there's going to be an alarm go off at 12:20. Just letting you know. And you will hear it. I'm guarantee you're going to hear it from someplace. But anyway, we appreciate Jake coming. This is by request of ElderQuest to let people know, again, ask questions about Medicare, Medicaid, insurance, things of that nature. You may be happy with your plan. Jake's going to talk about it. We appreciate him coming. And we're just going to turn the time over to Jake and let you rock and roll, my friend.
Fantastic. Oh, I can hear the microphone now. Coming in loud and clear. Everybody here okay? Hopefully on the Zoom as well. Awesome. Okay. Well, we get to talk. Oh, I need to mute it on this. How do we do that? I'm definitely hearing reverberation. Oh, you know what? Where's my volume? Hey, this. Hello, hello. I still hear it, but it's not as bad.
You turn the volume all the way down instead of
mute. Let's try it mute. Hello, hello. There. That must have accidentally got turned on.
When you turn it over again.
No more reverberation. Okay. All right. Now, technology, right? It's one of those things that when it's working for you, it's fantastic. It makes your life easier. But what about when it works against you? You want to throw your phone on the ground, right? In frustration. Okay. So Medicare. This is one of those topics that, as I kind of tell people, it is a necessary evil. We've all kind of got to deal with it sooner or later. So since it's this thing we all have to deal with, let's make the best out of it, right? Let's see if we can't help you get the most out of it. It's something you got to deal with, and it costs money, doesn't it? And if it's costing you money every month, we may as well help you get the most out of it, right? And there are so many ways to do that. And my job is, I'm what's called a broker, an insurance broker, a Medicare independent advisor. I go by a lot of different titles. The key thing to understand is there's a lot of different options out there that someone can get with their Medicare, and I represent those various options, okay? So I'm not tied down to one particular company that says, hey, Jake, you got to push our product even if it's terrible. And that was the case back in the day. Over 10 years ago, I started with a company called Humana. And when I first started, their product was really good. And then a year later, they dropped Intermountain Healthcare. In Utah, is that a big deal? Yes, it is in Utah. So that was the writing on the wall. That's all I needed to say. Okay, I'm done working for any one company. I'm going independent so I can represent all companies. Since then, Humana has done amazing things and is a fantastic product on a side note. But I just say that to illustrate it's very difficult, and I would tell anybody to be leery of anybody that you're talking to if they only represent one company. If they work for Humana, if they work for United Healthcare, take a wild guess what they're going to tell you is the best product, what they represent, because that's the only thing that they can offer you, right? So having an independent broker is key. So I want to jump into what I call, I kind of call this a Medicare 101. This is a conversation I have with somebody when they first turn 65 or when they first get onto Medicare, right? Retire and get onto Medicare. Maybe it's 67, maybe it's 70, whatever. This is the conversation when I have it with people, that things that they wish they knew back when they first started Medicare. Even people that have been on Medicare for 5, 10, 15 years. I talked to my grandpa and had this brief conversation with him, and he's like, nobody told me that when I started Medicare 10 years ago. I would have chose that. It can be awfully frustrating knowing if you're only given certain information, you can only choose amongst the information you're given. That's all you know, right? You don't know what you don't know. There's just way too much information out there. So this is kind of the discussion to have to make sure people are aware of what is even available, to then go into the specifics of each particular plan. That's not something I'm allowed to do in this meeting. This meeting is designed to be more educational. And then based on what you hear here, if you have questions about how that applies to your specific situation, sure, we can always talk about that, right? But for this particular situation, we just want to make sure you understand how Medicare works, what your options even are. So we'll jump into this, okay? What we call original Medicare, okay? I'm going to do a lot of scribbling, okay? Original Medicare or traditional Medicare is another name for it. It's composed of two parts, Part A and Part B. A is your hospital coverage. B is your doctor coverage or medical coverage, okay? Does that card look familiar to everybody?
Yep.
I hope so. But interestingly enough, I would guess that the majority of you are probably not using that card in your healthcare. It's a card you have. It's proof that you have Medicare. But if you have a different plan with it, you're using that different card. You're not using this card. This is good to have. Do not throw it away. Certain people, depending on the type of coverage you have, do need to have that card and do need to actually pull that out at the doctor's office. Depends on what you have. We'll talk about that. Part A for most people, no cost, okay? It's been earned by virtue of all your working years or your partner or spouse's working years. It's Part B that has a cost. Anybody have any idea what that cost is? I guess probably I shouldn't ask questions unless the people in the room want to get involved. Do we ask questions or no?
Just went down.
So that would be, so that's my first question, quiz. Anybody know what Medicare is costing them every month? Whether they like it or not, it's coming out of your Social Security check. $164.90. Okay.
It just went down, didn't it? For this past year, about $5.
For the first time in 10 years
Yes.
that I've been doing this plus, it went down for the first time. I wouldn't count on seeing that again. I think that was a fluke. If you look at the track record of the government, that's a fluke. Okay. But enjoy the fluke this year, right? We'll see what comes up next year.
Jake, I think there's another fluke, depending on retirement. If you get into a very high tax bracket because of what you're doing,
Yep.
that affects your premium here.
For your Part B. Yeah.
So it could go up significantly depending on what else is happening in your retirement.
That's worth mentioning. Most people, as I talk to them with, as they've been on Medicare for a while, in retirement, right? Most people don't continue making the same money they were making when they were working, right? That kind of drops a little bit. So for most people, it eventually drops down to a point where they're paying this. But there are plenty of people when they first turn 65, for example, and are eligible for Medicare, they're still working, but they choose Medicare instead of their work health insurance because the Medicare coverage is better. We just determined that's better for them. And so they could be paying in the $200, $300, $400 range for their Part B. And even with that cost that they're paying, it's still cheaper than what they're paying through their job. So that's one of those things, if somebody's wondering about that, that's what we look at. That's a big question people have. When I turn 65, should I take Medicare or should I continue with my work coverage? The only way to know that is compare. So I'll sit down with somebody who looks side by side. What are you paying for your work coverage? What's the deductible? What are all the different ways it's covered? After the deductible, do you have to pay a certain percentage of your costs? Medicare is built very differently depending on what you choose. So thanks for bringing that up. Yes, your B can be different. I'm guessing for most of you, again, once you've been on Medicare long enough, it tends to hang around that $164.90, which is the lowest you get, unless there's also an exception to that. There's exceptions to everything, right? How in the world do you keep track of this stuff? The exception could be, that could be zero. If your income is low enough, the state of Utah would pay that $164.90 for you. And for any of you where that applies, you probably know it, right? You know you're not paying it. It's still being paid. It's just not being paid by you, right? If you're wondering if that's something you may qualify for, let me know. Sadly, one of the biggest underutilized benefits here in Utah is what's called LIS, low income subsidy, where people could be getting extra assistance in paying for their Medicare costs and they don't know it. And so they have not applied. And I pressed the speaker again, so I got to mute it. My button's in a really bad place on my iPad. Mute it. Hello?
Good.
Okay, back to mute. Okay, so, and then with this Part A, you have a deductible, right? With Part B, you have a deductible. Even after you've met these deductibles, you still got to worry about paying 20% of most things that you're doing. 20% of a doctor visit is not too much, not too bad, right? What about 20% of something major? That may not be as fun. Yeah. So in instances like that, Medicare has basically said, right? I'm not speaking for the government, but the general idea is Medicare is basically saying, hey, if you don't like this coverage as we offer it, right? You're welcome to go to insurance companies to make it better. That's up to you. Good luck deciding. And that's where all the confusion comes, right? Whole lot of options, different companies, right? So I will occasionally find somebody that's still on just this, just what we call original Medicare. And I don't want to say it's good or bad. It's probably not the thing I would choose. You're a little financially exposed in that scenario, right? If you have original Medicare without a supplement with it, and you're just paying 20% of everything you do, and you got these deductibles you got to worry about, that's not an ideal situation. I would submit that you could improve that. I mean, I've come across people that are paying bills from years ago because when they incurred those bills or those services, all they had was original Medicare. And sometimes those bills can be pretty hefty, okay? So moving on. So if somebody doesn't want to take their chances on just Medicare, they can go to insurance companies and fill in the gaps, right? So you've got these two options that may be familiar to you by now, right? You kind of get bombarded all year long, but especially this time of year, right? With all these different options and companies. So you have what's called a supplement. Another name for that is a Medigap policy, right? So these are synonymous. Same thing with this over here. An Advantage plan, another name for an Advantage plan is Part C of Medicare. So there's all kinds of parts. How many parts have we talked about so far? Part A and Part B. Okay. Part C is not offered by the government like Part A and B are. Either is Part D. Okay. So I gotta mention this because this gets some people into trouble. A lot of people assume, hey, when I retire or when I get onto Medicare, the government's going to give me everything I need to have, right? If it's something I'm supposed to have, they're going to send it to me and they're just going to start charging me money. Well, they got part of that right. They'll start charging you money, but they're not just going to necessarily set you up with every part you need to have. Okay. Case in point, Part D, your drug coverage, right? Part D is offered by insurance companies. It is not offered by the government, but the government requires you have it, unless you have some other type of creditable coverage through a job or retiree coverage or something like that. But if you just go straight on to Medicare, you lose your coverage at work, right? Because they say, hey, you're eligible for Medicare. You got to go on Medicare. We're done with you, right? And you don't get Part D, you stand to be penalized after a 63-day window. If you have a gap where that much time passes by and you don't get a Part D plan that you must proactively get yourself because it's not provided by the government, you get a penalty. And those that have that penalty, they know because it haunts them every month for the rest of their life. It never goes away. So a key to understand there is you've got to set up your Medicare right. If you don't, that mistake follows you forever. Okay. So if there's anybody in that age range right now, right on the Zoom or whatever, that's either 65 or past 65, but getting ready to retire and get on to Medicare, be happy to go over things with you to make sure that's set up properly. So in whatever you get, the Part D is included, that drug coverage you need to have. Okay.
I made that mistake, Jake. I figured I had coverage for a couple of months from my business I retired from. And so I didn't get started until a few months later. And I'm paying $3 a month for the rest of my life because I didn't have Part D coverage for a couple of months.
I've got a client that's got a penalty it got up to about $40 a month that they're paying for the rest of their life. They went years and years without Part D. Why did they go without Part D? Because they didn't have any prescriptions. Part of it they didn't know, and part of it was like, I think the sad thing is he actually knew, but he's like, why am I going to get this Part D? I'm not taking any prescriptions. Well, the government doesn't care if you think you need drugs or not. They just care that everybody has it. So it's quote unquote fair for everybody, right? Because maybe at 65, you're not taking a lot of prescriptions, right? But what about 85 years old, 20 years later? There's a chance you might be a drain on the system at that point, and you are taking some prescriptions. So they want everybody to be paying into this when they're first eligible to, okay? So if you look on this option on the left, the blue, the supplement, a supplement just has a range. It could be a range of cost. It depends on how old somebody is. I'll give you an example of somebody when they first turn 65-ish, right? You might pay about $140-ish for a supplement, right? Give or take. 10 years later, right? If you decide to get one at 75, it might be a whole lot more expensive. A supplement goes up in cost every year as you get older. Okay. Even if you stay healthy and take care of yourself, the cost still goes up. Okay. That supplement is fantastic coverage though. Okay. So remember, going back up top, right? Remember how Medicare pays 80% of what you're doing? That remaining 20% that you're responsible for, the supplement covers that, right? Just to draw all kinds of arrows and confuse you. Okay. So if you have a supplement, it's paying that 20%. That's probably a pretty appealing opportunity, right? Paying that $140 or whatever that may be a month could be a lot less than the 20% you could get stuck paying on a big bill, right? So that's why people get a supplement. The supplement does not include drug coverage. And again, that's where people get in trouble. They get a supplement, but they don't get the drug coverage that you need to get separate with it, a standalone Part D drug plan. National average cost of a drug plan is just over $40. So if you go this route, right, you're paying about $180 a month for your supplement and Part D drug plan, right? And that's on top of the $164.90 for some reason that got erased. And there it is back again, right? So you're still paying this no matter what, but then on top of that, you're opting in to pay an additional cost, right? If you go with that option, right? If you go that route. An Advantage plan is very different. An Advantage plan, at least here in Utah, these are built to be very competitive. They didn't always used to be that way, but they become this way because they have to. The majority of Advantage plans now in our market have no monthly cost. Okay. The Part D that you are required to have, okay, has no additional cost. It's built into the plan automatically. So whether you use drugs or not, doesn't matter. It's built into the plan. You get credit for having drug coverage, even if you don't use it. That's the key. And then these are the plans that give you all kinds of extra benefits you hear on TV, right? Dental, vision, hearing, free gym memberships, groceries is the new big thing they're talking about these days. All these different things, all for the grand total of $0. Okay. So yes, there's a very big difference in cost between the two coverages. Okay. What's interesting is both of these types of coverages cover the same types of benefits, your Medicare benefits. They both cover hospital and doctors and physical therapy, imaging, mental health, whatever it may be, right? They cover the same basic benefits. That's not their key difference. The key difference is in how do you pay for your portion of the cost? Would you rather pay a premium every month, or would you rather pay nothing per month and pay copays as you go? It's not a right or wrong answer. It just depends on the person, right? So I'm not the one to tell people. My job is to make people aware of their different options. And then based on their questions, we're kind of led down a path of, hey, maybe this makes more sense than this, right? So it kind of depends on the person. It's not to say one is right, one is wrong. Just to give you an idea, right? We had somebody in the audience here ask, well, why are you on this plan and I got put on this plan, right? My own parents are on different plans because I'm a very firm believer in don't just throw everybody on the same plan because that's my favorite plan, right? You have agents or brokers or people out there that they may represent a bunch of plans, but they just offer the same old two over and over again, right? Because those are just their favorites or they're just easy to sell, right? What I look at with every person is their specific drugs that they use, their specific doctors, their specific needs, right? Or if I'm not doing that right, their agent should be doing that, following up with them every year, right? An agent is not somebody that just enrolls you and then you don't talk to them again, right? It's somebody that's following up with you and reviewing your coverage, okay? To make sure as your needs change that you have the coverage to go with that, to align with your new changes each year. It's interesting that I'll talk to a lot of people on one thing or another. Probably more common that I come across somebody on an Advantage plan, okay? That $0 monthly premium is just awfully hard to pass up for a lot of people, right? So I just happen to see more people on Advantage plans. And I'll ask people all the time, how's your coverage treating you? Without fail, almost everyone says, it's great. It's working for me, right? That should be the answer, right? Because if that's not your answer, why are you on the plan, right? Should have found something else. So most people, their answer is going to be, my coverage is fine. It's good enough. I don't need to do anything. I don't need to make any changes, right? Well, how do you know you don't need to make any changes? Just because it's working? I've talked to people that have big dental needs, right? Medicare's not great at covering dental, are they? If you don't have one of these Advantage plans, you're not getting a lot of help with dental coverage from Medicare, right? You have to get it through one of these private insurance companies that offers it on the Advantage plan, right? I've talked to people that are needing to get dental work done, but because of the plan they're on, maybe they have $500 or $1,000 of dental, they don't have enough to do what they need to do. And yet just a second ago, they said their plan was fine, right? And it's working just fine. But then you open up somebody's eyes to say, well, would it help if you had $2,000 a dental or $3,000 a dental for no extra cost built into the plan for free? Okay. So my advice to people is check and compare, because these plans are not all created equal, right? These very much follow this idea of good, better, best, right? All these plans are good because in my opinion, having a Medicare Advantage plan is much better than having just straight Medicare, right? Where you're having to pay 20% of everything and having to pay these deductibles, right? That's a lot of out-of-pocket exposure. Sure, any of the Advantage plans are going to beat that because when you have these Advantage plans, guess what? Those Medicare deductibles go away, and that 20% that you would otherwise be responsible to pay on most of your benefits, that 20% goes away. Not all the benefits. Some of them you still pay 20%, but the majority of them, that 20% cost share that you would otherwise have goes away, and you get to pay those nice co-pays instead. Okay? So they're all good, but not every plan offers the same amount of dental or vision. Some people are so tight on their money that, yes, they could use additional money for groceries. That would help a lot of people that right now are having to pay for those on their own or having to go to other resources, and it can be really frustrating and hard and scary sometimes. Okay? So the key is to make sure that you just look and compare. If you have an agent, again, as long as they're an independent broker, that's what you're looking for, right? That somebody like me every year, this is not very fun. This is probably the worst part of my job. But I have to recertify with every plan every year to be able to truly offer it and say, hey, I offer all these plans. I have to retest with everyone. And if I don't pass the tests, I can't offer the product. But I want to be able to offer every Medicare Advantage plan, right, in the state of Utah. So I go through all that rigmarole and all these hoops that they make you jump through. So then when I talk to somebody, we can say, yes, we really want to find the best ideal option for you, given what your needs are, right? Instead of, let's put you on this plan because this is all I represent, or let's put you on this plan because this is my favorite one. Trust me, you'll like it, right? Without really looking at the needs. Does that make sense? So any questions about this? This is kind of the general Medicare 101. Other things to compare, right? Somebody mentioned something about the Medicare and U book. You know that white book you get every year for Medicare that you so thoroughly read? Because you have so much free time on your hands, right? And that's what you want to do in retirement, read insurance books, right? So that book, I find that it can be valuable sometimes for people when they're first new to Medicare, or if you've been on Medicare for years and you're just looking for something to read, you want to brush up on your Medicare knowledge. That's why I tell people, if somebody wants to do this stuff on their own, they totally can, right? I come across those people occasionally, but the fact that you can have an agent, a broker, and it costs you nothing, right? We're compensated by the insurance companies we represent. Why somebody wouldn't want an agent would surprise me. Unless, again, you have a lot of free time or you just really like this stuff. I've talked to clients. I've got clients that are engineers, right? Or big analyzers. Even a lot of those people, they'll analyze it all and they'll still call me and say, Jake, I've gone through all this, but I know what you do, right? I want to make sure I'm not missing something. I'm thinking I want to go with this plan. Does that sound good to you? And we'll run through it and make sure, okay, that could be, depending on a couple different things, right? Are your doctors covered on that plan, right? Because a lot of things you look at, right? If you look online or these different places where you can see the benefits, the numbers. In the back of the Medicare and U book, you see numbers. You see like brief copays. They don't give you most of the important stuff, in my opinion. They give you like 5 or 6 key points, right, on each plan, and that's about all you see. So they'll give you some benefits, some copays, maybe your max out of pocket for the year, right? But a lot of people will see a plan and see one copay that's lower and get really excited about that, right? Oh, I'm going to save $5 on my specialist doctor visits. Have you ever heard of that phrase, take 1 step forward, only to take 2 steps back? Some of my clients run into this problem, right? Where they hear about a really cool benefit on TV or something they get in the mail, right? They're like, oh, that's better done than what I have now. At least I think. Yeah, it sounds good, right? And so they get excited about a benefit and they call, right? And the people that you call on the phones, they're very good at what they do. I can't tell you how many of my clients accidentally made that call, got scammed, accidentally gave the person some of their information over the phone, which I don't advise because it's scary the things they can do with your information once they have your Medicare number. I've had clients of mine get enrolled on a plan they did not even know they enrolled in until they call me a couple weeks later and say, Jake, why did I get a new insurance card in the mail? My very first question is, did you talk about Medicare with anyone on the phone besides me? Okay, that's usually the root of the problem, right? People need very little information to do bad things these days, unfortunately. Okay. So people with
your Medicare number.
Yeah, Medicare number opens up the avenue to just about everything else. Most people already know don't give your social security number, right? I would argue that your Medicare number is just as sacred. Don't be going around giving that to people because that's what they need to make a change, whether you know it or not sometimes. So anyways, people get excited about certain benefits, right? They might hear about a certain benefit, but how often do you think if some agent is trying to convince somebody to move to a new plan, that they're going to tell that person's thinking about switching about the good and the bad? Do you think that's going to happen very often? Or do you think that they're just going to focus on all the good things about that plan so that they can convince the person to switch to that plan, right? They hear all the good. What about the bad? So I hear clients say, oh, Jake, I wanted this extra dental. Sorry, I got reeled in by this guy. I talked to this guy at Smith's or Walmart. It sounded so good. You know, I made an impulse buy on the spot. I'm regretting it now. Can we look at it, make sure it's a good fit type of thing? So we'll look at it. And yes, indeed, that one benefit might have been better, right? The dental was better, whatever. But then we check and 2 of their doctors aren't covered, right? Or their hospital right next in their backyard, right? Their hospital's not even covered that they want to be able to go to or need to go to. So there's just so many moving parts that even the Medicare and U book leaves wanting, right? It'll give you a couple basic copays about all the different plans, but that book tells you nothing about, well, great, on that new plan, are your doctors covered? How are your prescriptions covered? That's one of the biggest ones, right? People go searching after an awesome benefit or two they hear about, but then their drug coverage just tanks on the new plan. You got to understand with all these different plans, they have a balancing act with how they budget their plan. If they're putting a lot of money into really good drug coverage on their plan, then other benefits on the plan might suffer, right? They only have so much money to put into these plans. And so a lot of times if you see a plan with fantastic dental, you might ask, well, what's missing then, right? What other things may not be so good because this plan is so aggressive in some of these benefits? It's a balancing act, right? There's plans occasionally that will come out with such a fantastic benefits in every category. And you're like, for somebody like me who's been doing this a long time, I'll see that happen sometimes where a plan just, it doesn't fit with the rest of the market. It's like, wait, these benefits are way too good. Every other plan is hanging around here in the middle. And this plan has just got incredible benefits. It costs money to administer those benefits, right? That will often draw a lot of people to their plan, but it can mess up all kinds of things, okay? If they bring on a lot of members that have a lot of health problems, right? Because there's no health questions that determine whether or not you can get an Advantage plan, for example. They draw a lot of people to that plan. A lot of those people have a lot of sicknesses or problems because they can't discriminate, right? They got to take everybody that applies. What happens the next year? Yeah, they're gone, or they do the exact opposite, where they had the best of the best plans. They have the worst of the worst plans. This is an interesting year, again, because this is educational. I can't go into specifics. But this year is a plan where the bad changes are some of the worst I've ever seen, and the good changes are some of the best I've ever seen. So we're kind of seeing polar opposites. How do you know it's going to be ideal for your situation? Either become a Medicare expert or find one, right? That's the idea. So that is the general presentation I wanted to offer. I guess one other thing to mention, we already kind of talked about it, 65, how do you decide, right? Whether to go with Medicare or continue with your work coverage. That same reasoning or line of thinking applies to somebody that has the chance to have retiree coverage, right? Even past 65, right? If they decide, well, I know I could get Medicare at 65, but I'm going to keep working, so I'm just going to keep my coverage with work, right? Even if it's not as good, right? Sometimes maybe it's just easier to keep that coverage with your job since you're still working, right? But then 67, 68, a couple years later, they are finally ready to retire. The majority of people I see when they retire, if they are offered a retiree coverage, do you think they take it or do you think they deny it? They take it.
Take it.
Why do you think that is? What do you think is going through people's mind when they've worked for a company for 30 or 40 years, and when it finally comes time to retire, that company is offering them retiree coverage? Is that exciting? Hey, this is a benefit I earned. By golly, I just gave 30 years of my life to this company. They're giving me retiree benefits. I've earned this. I'm taking it, right? There's one possible issue with that though, right? They don't compare that retiree coverage that's being offered to them to what's being offered in the competitive Medicare market. And this right here, where all of these plans have to compete with each other. And if they don't offer a good plan, what happens? They lose membership. They lose members. Those members go shopping and find something else. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
That's the majority of what I see, whether it's somebody on DMBA that worked for the LDS church, right? Or worked for BYU, or people that were maybe teachers, right? At PEHP or EMI, a lot of these different coverages, those are big around here. And those people have been told, it's been drilled into them, right? This is the best coverage. If you drop it, you'll never get it back, which is true, by the way, right? If you drop it, you'll never get it back. So when I'm talking to somebody and we're comparing options, what do you think I'm making sure of? If we're moving them to one of these options, it better be a good option so they don't have a reason to want to move back to EMI or PEHP or DMBA, right? We make sure these benefits are better than what they've got, right? Again, we can't go into the details of that. It goes back to that same principle of compare. That's the only way you'll know. That's one of the most liberating things I've seen for people, though, that have been paying way more than they need to be paying, especially on retiree coverages. Why do you think people pay so much on retiree coverages? This is one thought. There's various reasons, and I don't want to go into great detail. But one of the reasons is they know most people will accept that coverage, right? They'll take the coverage without questioning it, right? Because it's a benefit they earned in retirement. And so that company that's offering that retiree coverage, they can charge whatever they want, and they know most people are going to pay it because that coverage is a take it or leave it, right? Take our coverage. If you don't want it, you can go do something else, but our coverage is awesome. And if you drop it, you lose it forever. But this is what we charge. That makes sense? So again, what I don't want to say and what I don't want to come across here is that one thing is better than another. You should do this or do that. That all depends on a one-on-one consultation. I would never dare speak generally, right? That anybody should do this or that or drop that coverage or this coverage. That's not the key, right? The key is just compare with your specific situation so you know. Just like not all Medicare Advantage plans are created equal, not all Medicare agents are created equal, right? Some people have been doing this for 6 months because their dad's doing it and they're just jumping into the business. I've talked to people all the time that have moved my clients, right? Again, one of my clients, impulse buy, gets talked in to do something else at a Smith's, right? Or at a Walmart, right? Gets talked into something else. That agent told them completely incorrect information, right? So not only did they get put on a worse plan, but they were told wrong things, right? Sometimes, just like with anything else in life, you don't know what you don't know. So the longer you do something, what do you realize? How little you know, right? The more you become an expert on something, you're like, geez, I didn't know anything about that. That's what I spent time realizing over the last 10 years, how little I know. But I've been taking 10 years to continue to learn those things, right? And I have to fix those issues all the time when people get put on a plan without being told the full story. Yeah.
So Jake, how often should someone talk to their agent? On an annual basis, semi-annually? Because now we're at the age of getting all those wonderful ads that we can't get away from on TV because you just turn the TV on and there are all sorts of people saying, do this and do that. How often should someone go through? Is there a renewal date that says, oh, yours comes up in June, yours comes up in July? Or you should just plan that on an annual basis, on my birthday, I'm going to go talk to Jake. I'm going to go talk to Fred or whomever to ask more about this. Is there a kind of a set schedule to make sure that
Good question.
I don't know.
Right.
Cover that for us.
Yes, that's a very good question. And I will say, just like about with everything else with Medicare, the answer is
It depends.
it depends. Anybody that's just given solid set answers, you better be leery of it, really. I mean, it depends. What's the best plan? It depends, right? What matters to you? What benefits are important to you, right? That's one of the most common questions I get, right? Yeah, what is the best plan? So anyways, his question about how often do we need to talk about renewals and things like that, right? You guys probably know that during this open enrollment period right now, you can enroll in plans between October 15th to December 7th, okay? Whatever your final plan decision is by December 7th is what you end up on January 1st. So again, I've had clients of mine that have been bamboozled by a rep they talked at a store or something, right, or on the phone, and they're realizing after, I definitely made a mistake. I forgot to call Jake, or I lost his card, and then they finally find it or whatever, right? They can call me, and as long as it's early enough in open enrollment, we can still fix it, right? If they're on some plan, I can put them on a new plan. And because my plan got submitted after that first one did, that's what goes effective January 1st. So we call it last application in. So I've had people realizing this mistake. Last day of open enrollment is one of my busiest days, December 7th. People realize mistakes. They're like, oh man, I got to call Jake. I've been putting it off. And we have to do a lot of those last second switches. Last one in, right? Last application in is what starts on January 1st. And then that plan remains as it is throughout the entire year. So it's a contractual year. The company, the insurance company can't go in and make changes on you mid-year, right? Pull the rug out from under you, change the benefits. So it remains that way for the entire year. So most people don't feel a need to do anything in the middle of the year unless they have questions, right? I mean, if you're dealing with an agent that's doing what they're supposed to, they answer calls when their clients have questions, and that'll happen most of the year. I'd say 80% of people don't really do much with their coverage, right? Kind of the 80-20 rule. 20% of my clients create about 80% of my workload. The people that call all the time, that have questions all the time, and there are those, right? It's not to say it's good or bad. Most people have this attitude, hey, if it's not broken, don't fix it. My coverage is paying my bills. Again, I would say to that, careful, just because it's good doesn't mean there's something better, right? Or doesn't mean it's the best thing for you. But hey, I'm glad it's at least working for you. At the very bare minimum, your plan should at least be working for you, right? But yeah, for the most part, it goes all year long. So most people don't have a need to change. There are ways you can change it. In the middle of the year, if you move, don't feel like you're stuck with no coverage in the place where you move, right? You have special enrollment periods throughout the year where you can change from one plan to another. Sometimes if you gain Medicaid for the first time or lose Medicaid, right? It could be a financial thing. This year we had FEMA disasters in Utah, declared flooding, which opens up special enrollment periods where people can literally change their plan in the middle of the year. So there's all kinds of various options that people have. If you're wondering whether you can change your plan in the middle of the year because if for some reason you don't like it, I tell my clients to call me. We can kind of go through all the different SEPs, special enrollment reasons, and we might be able to find one for you. Oh, go ahead. 2 questions.
Go ahead, Gwen.
I did a lot of research on my own, not with an independent broker online, and I thought I found that Advantage plans were best for me, but some were heavier on the hospital benefits and some were heavier on the dental. And I had to decide, what am I going to need? Well, I hardly ever go to the hospital, but man, do I have to go to the dentist. But they change from year to year too, what they offer. So how do you know what Advantage plan to get if you want one or the other? So I just got something and I got a separate private dental insurance plan, which pays 50%. But I want to change. I want to get something that's both good in Advantage as well as a separate dental plan. That's what Susie Orman says to do.
Typically, what I would tell somebody is there are Medicare Advantage plans out there, again, without going into specifics of any particular plan, because I can't do that here.
Yeah.
Anytime I find one of my clients on a standalone dental plan, I feel like that's a problem that needs to be fixed. There's no need to be paying for extra dental plan. Most of these Advantage plans 5-10 years ago had almost no dental coverage in them at all, right?
Yeah.
So I did years ago, 5-10 years ago, I would sell clients an Advantage plan and then a separate dental plan.
Yeah.
You had to if they wanted dental. Now these plans have become so competitive. If somebody's paying for a dental plan, we should chat, or they should talk to somebody that knows what they're doing, because the dental is generous enough on these Medicare plans now that you can get good dental coverage and good hospital coverage in the same plan.
But the dental plans is mostly just regular routine fillings and cleanings, not
anymore.
implants.
Not anymore. That is
Really?
That has totally changed.
Well, thank you.
There are plans where you can get implants covered, the most expensive of the most expensive. You can get crowns, dentures, bridge work, fillings, root canals, the whole shebang. You can get those things covered without a penny out of your own pocket. That goes back to good, better, best, right? It sounds like you're on a good Advantage plan right now, but if you're on one where you're still having to pay extra for dental, that's probably not the best option for you.
Gwen, he has some cards up here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jake.
That is, you are such a good example. I'm so glad you asked that question. This idea of people are paying extra money for things that I find all the time they don't need to be paying extra money for.
I'm paying extra for hospital too.
Yeah. And there is something you can do to pay extra for a hospital to get extra hospital coverage that we could talk about. There's a place for that, depending on the person and their propensity for needing to go to the hospital a lot. If not, paying extra for hospital coverage may not make sense either, because there are extra little supplemental plans you can get, even with an Advantage plan. Yeah.
Yeah, two things.
8 minutes before this big announcement thing,
yeah.
so we'll try to beat that.
Yeah, is it, well, I have two questions. One, is it generally true that because when a plan that you're on goes to make a change for the next year, are they required to notify you? I noticed that happened with the plan I was on.
Yep.
But is that true for in general, that they're required to let you know in advance what the changes are going to be? That's the first question.
Yes. They
Okay.
are required to notify you of changes to your plan each year.
That's
Do
a
any of
good
you know
time.
how that comes and what format that comes?
It's a letter.
They send you, it's like a little mini booklet that you should have already received by now. We call it the ANOC. We in the insurance industry, we live in abbreviations, right? Because ANOC is a lot shorter to say than annual notice of change. So we say ANOC, ANOC. So every year I'll send a customary letter out to all my clients saying the very first thing of all, we can definitely talk about any questions you have, but first things first, you're going to get an ANOC from your insurance company. Look it over to see if there's anything alarming to you. Because if not, it's really easy. This is one of those years where you can just take it easy. You don't need to worry about making any changes if you don't see anything alarming, right? It'll literally put in this annual notice of change book 2 columns side by side. These are your benefits in 2023. This is what they will be in 2024. Do you like what you see? That's the whole point of the book. They have to disclose to you what the changes are.
That's
So
a
pay
good
attention to
time,
that
by the
ANOC.
way, to contact an agent when you get that. The other question is, I'm wondering under what circumstances you would either get a change over to a standard, you know, a EFGHIJK or plan, or one of these other supplemental plans you're mentioning, in addition to the Advantage plan. Can you give me some instances where that's a good thing to consider?
Yes, that's an awfully good question. That's one of those things also that's kind of all relative
Yeah.
to the person. So what I most often see, I'll go off what I most often see. This is likely a scenario to capture a lot of different people that they can kind of align themselves with. So basically, most people I talk to when they first get on Medicare, they don't have a lot of health issues going on yet, right? So most people choose an Advantage plan, right? They just really like that 0 monthly cost, okay? Again, not saying it's right for every person, but that's what most people do. But then typically 5, 10, 15 years down the road, they start getting into their 70s or so. They're going to the hospital a little more frequently, going to doctors a little more frequently. And that's when I'll often get a call from a client saying, Jake, is this a time where maybe I should start considering going over to that supplement, right? Where I get that 80% coverage by Medicare, the 20% coverage by the supplement, thus 100% coverage. So it's really good coverage, right? And the answer is, it depends. Don't you just love that? I hate it too. I would love to just give people a solid, easy answer. This is the answer. 2 + 2 is 4. That's a nice answer, right? Some answers are solid, just not in insurance. So basically, in that scenario, I'll often look at something with them. We say, try to keep emotion out of it. You're probably getting a little more nervous as you get older because you're doing more and you're wondering, do you really need to get this? So I'll say, hey, let's look at this past year. How often did you go to the doctor? And we literally count up the visits. Oh, I go about once a quarter. Well, how many doctors do you see once a quarter? We'll literally add up all the copays they paid and seen doctors that year. We'll do the same thing with hospital. Well, you did do one outpatient surgery. You know, maybe that's $350 for your outpatient surgery. Anything else you do at the hospital? No, that's it. So we'll add up all the different things they did. Maybe they have to get some durable medical equipment, right? Where they're paying 20% for a cane, wheelchair, walker, oxygen, whatever, right? We add up their different costs and we say, okay, hey, great. So maybe you're at $300 or $500 a year, $900 a year in copays, right? Okay. For the entire year, you're paying $900 in copays. Over here on the supplement with drug plan, you would be paying $200 or $250 a month, every single month. We multiply that out by 12 and we see which one is bigger. And I asked this last year with all these different things you did, the doctor visits, was it pretty a typical year? You went to the hospital once that year or twice that year. Is that a typical year or was that an abnormal year? If it's a typical year, then I tell people, well, typically this is what you're paying in copays every year in your Advantage plan. Do you want to go over to this supplement and pay more than that amount in premium every month, guaranteed, comes out of your checking account every month before you even use the service, before you even use the plan? So I kind of let numbers answer the question, right? Instead of, well, how do you feel about it, right? If people get nervous, they can lose sleep over anything, right? And just beat it to death analyzing. So I try to keep emotion out and say, let's keep that out of it. Let's look at numbers. Let's let numbers tell the story, right? So kind of a fun math problem to deal with.
Okay, I have a question about copays. When my husband was alive, he had a condition that required us to go to a specialist once a month. So $40 was our copay, which isn't bad if you're not going once a month.
Yeah.
So it really added up. And so I've been thinking about myself, what if I ever got in that situation? Would it be, what would my plan be if I ever got into that situation?
Where you started going to more doctors?
Yes.
You would pay, if you do nothing, right? You'll just pay more copays, right? What I've typically seen on the low end, right? When somebody first turns 65 and a supplement cost is going to be at its very lowest, I've seen typically even at that age of 65, you could be going to about 3, sometimes 4, but at least 3 specialists a month and still be paying less in copays on your Advantage plan than you would be paying on a supplement. And that's even at 65 when your supplement's at the lowest. If you just do the math on it, right? If you look at, a typical supplement for a 65-year-old, $140, but you got to have a separate drug plan with it. You're tacking on another $20, $30. So you're $170, $180 a month on that supplement. But those specialist visits, you're on a plan where the specialist copay maybe is a little high, 40. They can get a little bit lower than that. But if you're doing 40 times 3 doctors a month, that's $120 a month, which most of my clients don't go see specialists every month. Pain doctors, yeah. You got to do those every month typically. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So it's looking at math. People get nervous when they start going to see doctors more. But even then, we often see, even going to a lot of doctors, they're still paying less than they would be on a supplement. But a lot of it for people is, hey, what helps you sleep better at night too, right?
This is good. We need to practice in the lines.
Okay. Does that answer your question? Yeah. The other option you have is you could look at the option if you wanted. If you see the cost of the supplement and decide, yeah, maybe I do want to try a supplement out, right? You can go over to a supplement if you can qualify to get on it. All the supplements have health questions. So unlike an Advantage plan, you do have health questions to get on a supplement. The only exception to that is when you first turn 65. When you're first new to Medicare, you could get on a supplement without having to answer any health questions, but that's the only time. After that, you got to be able to pass health questions. If you can then get on a supplement, and what's basically, you have what's called a trial, right? But it works the other way, right? If you start Medicare on a supplement and decide you want to try out an Advantage plan for a year, you can do that. And if you decide you want to go back to a supplement, you can, guaranteed, regardless of your health. That's if you start on a supplement. But if you start on an Advantage plan, go over to a supplement and decide you want to go back to an Advantage plan, can you do that? Yeah, because there's no health questions to determine your eligibility for an Advantage plan.
In our Advantage.
Microphone.
One thing that was in our Advantage is that the Part D drug coverage, and he had to take some pretty expensive drugs, and they were completely paid for. So I figured, okay, we pay $40 to go to this cancer specialist, and then they prescribe a outrageous pill for him, but it's completely paid. So I felt like it was equaling out.
Those are the two big costs that you have on any plan, right? Drug costs and medical costs. For, I don't want to say most, that would be too hard to say is a blanket statement, but it seems like a lot of people I talk to, they have more drug costs than they do medical costs, right? Because maybe you don't go to the doctor every month, but what do you do every month? Take your meds, right? That's something you got to do every month. So unless you're on a plan where you're getting all your meds for free or something, and there are those, right? Depending on your meds, that's something worth looking at too, right? Depending on how your meds are covered. That's a big one though. Some people do make the mistake. I'll at least mention this along those lines. A lot of people on looking at the supplement option, the one on the left, okay? A lot of people feel like when they hear how good a supplement plan is, right? They somehow confuse that to mean that the drug coverage on that option is also just as good, right? They say, well, I had a client tell me this the other day. I was talking to a client turning 65 and they're like, well, Jake, I got a lot of medical costs, or sorry, prescription costs. So I think I want to go up the supplement. I'm like, wait, what does this supplement have to do with drug costs? Those are two separate policies you have. You have this Medicare supplement and you have the standalone Part D plan that you have to get with it, right? So just because your Medicare supplement is really good medical coverage, it doesn't mean the standalone drug plan you get with it is, right? So don't make the mistake of thinking because of going to the supplement route because you need better drug coverage. You can find better drug coverage within all the different Advantage plans by looking at one versus another. I found a lot of times what's crazy is if over here on the left, if you get a standalone Part D plan, right, which with a supplement you do, right? The supplement does not have drug coverage built into it. So you have to purchase a separate standalone drug plan. That drug plan costs money, right? I've come across the occasional person where they have original Medicare, right? They've got their Medicare, and then they only have a drug plan. They don't have a supplement or a Medicare Advantage plan. They just have a drug plan. You know what's crazy about that? They could get similar drug coverage to that on an Advantage plan, but an Advantage plan has no cost, and all standalone Part D drug plans do have a cost. So they're actually missing out on the benefits of the Medicare Advantage plan that has no monthly cost because they're on a standalone Part D drug plan paying $30, $40 a month for a drug plan that has no dental, vision, hearing, any of these other benefits. It's crazy the scenarios you find people in. So there's just so many endless scenarios that somebody could find themselves in. So that's why my recommendation to somebody is, yes, either become a Medicare expert or find one. Or if you found one back in the day that you haven't talked to in a while, I'd be happy to help you out because that's something I do with my clients every year. I think it's too important not to have up-to-date information because things change every year. So does that all make sense? Any other questions? Fantastic questions. Okay. Guess
If you have questions at home, please unmute your microphone and ask. Now's the time.
And while people are deciding if they want to ask questions, I could bring up one last thing. Since it's at the bottom of this, right? It's here. Something to consider in all the different Advantage plans, right? This has to do with Advantage plans, okay? Because Medicare supplements, they just basically cover anyone that accepts Medicare, right? So you're not as worried about network on a supplement as you are in an Advantage plan, where an Advantage plan might be an HMO or a PPO. So you have a network of providers. You want to make sure you're going to providers within your system. Otherwise, they out of network on an HMO would be not covered, or on a PPO, they might be covered, but you're going to pay more money than you need to be. Okay. So you've got these 4 major medical provider systems in Utah. Okay. Intermountain, Mountain Star, Steward. I should update that. Steward has recently been changed to Holy Cross. If you've heard of that, that's now Holy Cross, and University of Utah. Okay. Again, this goes back to the idea of not all Advantage plans are created equal. I'll find some people, they might be on a plan that only covers Intermountain, right? And again, they might have that attitude of, well, that's good enough. I do everything at Intermountain. But then I've come across clients that are like, Jake, I was on Intermountain for 30 years, but then I got referred to a doctor in the University of Utah because they're known for having a lot of unique specialists. And the only doctor that I was recommended was one there. I couldn't go there because of the plan I was on. They were out of network, right? So network is a big deal, right? That's not something to be overlooked, right? Especially as people get older and they might start getting referred to doctors they've never had to go to before. You just don't know about them yet, right? What doctors are you going to 10 years from now, right? So I'm very much a proponent of keeping as many doors open as possible, not knowing what's going to happen to you. So if you have a plan that only gives you access to Intermountain, that's great. But let's take it back to that idea of good, better, best, right? Having access to just Intermountain healthcare is good, but would it be better perhaps to have access to all of them, especially if it didn't cost you any extra money? I would say so. That to me seems like a no-brainer. So that's another thing to consider, that again, unfortunately, in the Medicare U book you get every year, they don't tell you about that, right? They'll give you kind of a couple key copays with each plan in the back of the book, but they don't tell you anything about what networks are covered, what hospitals are covered, are your doctors covered. So those are other things you got to consider, right, when determining to make a change to a plan. So anyways, I just wanted to throw that in there. Network is extremely important.
No questions at home.
Awesome. Okay, we're good then. Thank you, everybody,
Okay.
for coming.
Thank you, Jake. One last thing. I think the key thing you want to look at is, as he said, ask questions. We talk about lifelong learning. We talk
Stop
about being
broadcasting.
informed. As members of ElderQuest, our key thing is
Stop it.
get as much information as you can. Be like David Wilson. Be the dumb guy. I got a question about this. Well, you've asked it before. Yeah, but I still don't understand. Ask the questions. Feel free to ask that of your agent. You can talk to Jake. You can talk to anybody else. I mean, that's the one thing that why we had Jake come in. He didn't say, "Oh, you got to come to me. You have to come to me." Talk to your own agent. If you have a good relationship with your agent, talk to him or her. But ask questions so that you are informed. That's my phone. There. Late notice for some reason. Anyway, I said that. Shush.
Everyone gave us.
I know, and my phone is doing other things. It does do it anyway. Anyway, the key thing is ask questions, be informed. If you want to talk to Jake afterwards, feel free to do so. But have a great afternoon. We appreciate you. We'll see you tomorrow.